We're going to do a little tandem presentation here today. So we'll be presenting together, Dean and I. My name is Don Longo. I'm the editor-in-chief of Convenience Store News, editorial director for Stagnito Media. And I just want to thank everybody again for being here to listen to us talk about the convenience store industry and particularly about the growth of food service at convenience stores. My background has been in business journalism for almost 30 years now, and this is kind of like coming full circle. I've covered apparel stores, discount department stores. I date myself when I talk about companies I used to cover, like Corvettes and stores like that. But my very first job in business journalism was with Nation's Restaurant News. So it's kind of like come full circle, come back to the NRA again after all these years, because convenience stores now are making such a great push into the food service business. A little bit about the presentation you're gonna see. We're gonna start off talking about the current state of the industry, of the convenience store industry. It was a year of many record highs in sales throughout in the industry, but there were also some sour notes, and we'll talk about those as well. Most of the data in the first part of this presentation is from our Convenience Store News Industry Report. Basically, it's a look at 2011 sales and store performance in the convenience store industry. I was going to say it's hot off the presses, but actually it hasn't gone to press yet, so you're one of the first people to actually see this data in terms of sales performance of product categories within the convenience store. And then finally, we also have some research, because we wanted to not just look at last year's sales, but we really wanted to see whether some of the initiatives that convenience stores have been doing are really gaining traction with consumers. So we did a down and dirty internet survey of convenience store shoppers in January of 2012, and we'll take a look at some of those results and see if really some of the investments that convenience stores are making in the food service area, if they're really paying off with consumers. So let me introduce now my co-presenter, Dean Dirks of Dirks Consulting. Dean?
Just a quick industry background on me. I started working in my dad's grocery store when I was 8, so I kind of came up through that business. When I got out of college, I went to work for Marriott, was in catering and restaurant business, and then after about 8 years, I got in C-store food service management, and I worked there for about 8 years, and then I became director of operations for 50 convenience stores and about 20 restaurants and about 5 different concepts. And since then, I've been a food service consultant, mostly for convenience store food service, from proprietary and unbranded and branded. And in addition to that, now I own 3 Subway restaurants that kind of keep me in the hook of the industry. So I kind of have lasted a lot longer than most people do in this business and seen a lot of things the hard way. And so I'll try to share some of that with you today.
Thanks, Dean. And Dean's been a great partner for Convenience Store News. He's been a stalwart on our Convenience Store News food service roundtables that we have on an annual basis, and he's also a member of our Convenience Store News How to Do World-Class Food Service How-To Crew, and that runs monthly in our magazine. It's a panel of food service experts that provide a lot of background for us and a lot of expertise in covering the food service industry for convenience store operators. So let's take a look at the current state of the industry. The total industry itself is huge. It's 148,000 convenience stores in the United States, and it's also fragmented, which is good news. That you want to be in a business where no one player dominates the industry. I often look at one of the other retail channels that I covered in a past life, the drugstore industry. And once you get past covering Walgreens and CVS, well, there's not much else to talk about. That's about 95% of the drugstore business. But when you look at the convenience store business, the largest player in the convenience store business, 7-Eleven, doesn't control more than 10% of the entire industry. So it's a very fragmented business. At the same time, at the top of the business, the larger chains, consolidation is continuing. If you look at the top 20 chains last year in store count growth, they grew at 4 times the rate of the industry as a whole. Companies like 7-Eleven added over 600 stores, Sunoco almost 100, Casey's in Iowa added 76. I was in Ohio a couple of weeks ago with Speedway, and they're just about to close on 88 convenience store gas stations from a company called Gas America in Indiana and Ohio. So acquisitions and mergers are still ripe in this industry. It continues to happen, and we would expect to see more of that going forward. At the same time, a big contributor to the fragmented nature of the industry is the fact that still more than 60% of the industry is run by single-store operators. These are entrepreneurs that run one store. So you've got this dichotomy in the industry of large chains that are acquiring other chains and getting bigger, and yet you still have this large group of independent operators that continue to do very well, although there's still high churn among them. When we show some slides on 2011 and what the industry was, how the industry performed last year, you're going to see that it was a record high year for sales. That's the good news. The bad news is that a lot of those sales came from high fuel prices, and motor fuels is one of the lowest margin product categories a convenience store can sell. The more important category, the in-store sales, grew at about 3%. Grew at 3% in 2011, and the major category gains were prepared food, which is both on and off-premise prepared food in the store, and alternative snacks, which is composed of protein bars and meat snacks like beef jerky and things like that. You'll see the big trend that's been going on, and you'll see that in the slides as we go forward, is the growth of food service sales in the convenience store to take the place of lost cigarette profits. It would seem as if there are people that would just like to tax cigarettes and regulate cigarettes right out of existence today. If you're a convenience store and you depend on cigarettes for your future, you probably don't have much of a future anymore. Between federal taxation, FDA regulation, state regulation and taxation, for example, there's something going on right now in California. It's called Proposition 29. The anti-smoking crowd in the state couldn't get the legislature to pass another tax increase on tobacco because they're already one of the highest tax states on tobacco. So they put a ballot initiative to get the populace to vote on increasing cigarettes by $1 a pack. That goes to vote June 4th, and we'll see how that goes. And if that gets passed, you might see more of that across the country. So when that happens, it doesn't only cut into raising the prices for cigarette smokers and a core customer of convenience stores, but also drives more sales to the black market and Indian reservations and other places where they can avoid the taxes, where consumers can avoid the taxes. Another positive note was the food service. Food service sales in 2011 grew and outpaced all other in-store categories by a wide margin, and the industry continues to count on food service to drive sales in the future. Dean?
In this slide, if you look, all the retail outlets have been flat since 2005, and the convenience store outlets has grown almost 8,000 units. And when I looked at this, I was a little surprised because, if you look at dollar stores, they've grown a little bit with this in economy, would make sense. But I was surprised that the warehouse clubs and supermarkets and mass merchandisers have been pretty flat. In fact, mass merchandisers is down a little bit. So I think that this is good for us because we're gaining traction. I think people are starting to put a value on convenience more than they are price in some points, and that's good for our industry.
But at the same time, growth appears to have plateaued in terms of store count over the last 3 years. As you can see from this chart, as I mentioned, store count has plateaued between 144,000, 148,000 convenience stores, give or take a few thousand. We don't expect that to grow a whole lot more going forward. Again, with the activity you're going to see within those groups and those bars, you're going to see that group of 37.1, which are chain-operated stores. You're going to see continued consolidation among those. And then you're going to see that 63% of single-store operators, some of them falling out, but more being added as the big oil companies continue to divest their retail operations. And many of those go to new Americans that come into the country, basically buying a store. They're buying a job for themselves and their family in a lot of cases. And so you're going to, so far, that number has held pretty strong for the last 3 years on the number of single stores. So single stores are still a huge part of the business.
And in this slide, on the total convenience stores, this is really sales. We're up 20% in 2011, and the really big number here is that by 2015, we're going to be at $1 trillion in sales. And that's the number that I don't think anybody ever thought could be accomplished 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just enormous amount of growth. But let's take the fuel out of the equation here, because the fuel, as I mentioned earlier, convenience stores are lucky if they're making 5 to 8 cents a gallon sometimes on motor fuel. But let's look at another record high. The average convenience store last year did almost $1.3 million in in-store sales. When I say in-store sales, that's everything but fuel. So that's food service, drinks, cigarettes, everything that's sold within the store. The rate of growth is a little slower than in previous years, but the economy has also been a lot slower in the last few years. But as far as good news, this is very good. Now, the interesting thing that I always mention about this number is that all this data is industry averages. It's national averages. That includes the good and it includes the bad. What's going on in the industry also is there's this pulling apart between the good operators and the poorer operators. And if you look at this, and if you were a Sheetz or a Wawa, you looked at that 1.3 million, you'd probably say that's pretty low. But for many, many retailers will be struggling to reach that number. So from an average point, it's great that it's growing, but if you were a retailer, a convenience store retailer doing less than that, again, you've probably got problems going forward.
The total in-store sales, including food service and merchandise, I had trouble reading this line a little bit, but it looks like the last 3 years there's been a steady growth, 5%, 6.1%, and 7.5%. And it's had a positive growth since 2004. It's outpaced the state of the stores and sales of every year since 2004. So you can see food service is definitely a big chunk of how people view the future, and I think these are real positive numbers.
Diving into the top 10 in-store product categories at a convenience store, let's just take a look at maybe the top couple of categories. And if you look at the left side of the chart first, you see the problem with cigarettes. Cigarettes as a percentage of in-store sales has been declining. It's represented only 33.74% of sales in 2011, which was down from 34.25% in 2010. At the same time, the second largest category, food service, continues to grow. It went from 12.9% in 2009 to 13.3% in 2010 to 13.98% in 2011. Packaged beverages, by the way, also had a very strong year last year in sales growth for convenience stores. On the right-hand side of the chart, though, you see little different story. You see a decline in percentage of gross margin dollars of cigarettes from almost 20% of gross margin dollars to 18.64%. And in the meantime, food service is no longer number 2. It's number 1 in percentage of gross margin dollars. So where would you put your investment in? Where are you going to try to grow your sales? You're going to grow your sales in the area where you're making your most profits. And you can see why convenience stores are looking at food service. And as I mentioned, packaged beverages, again, also increased in their percentage of gross margin dollars last year.
The top categories by sales growth, 2 out of the 5 were food service. Sales growth was prepared foods was 10.6 and cold dispensed beverages was 8.3. And you know what sticks at is the 8.3% sales growth is a 63% gross margin. So you know, if the more cold beverages you can sell, that's a lot of money. And 10.6% growth is 40% gross margin percent, so that's also very well. So, you know, the more you can grow your food service sales, it's definitely a higher gross margin. And, you know, I haven't looked at gross margin on cigarettes, but I'm sure it's 4 or 5%. And I can remember when it was 14. So you got to make the room somewhere, and this is kind of the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been covering a number of chains that are increasing their number of fountain heads, for example, that they're carrying because they've been so successful with fountain beverages. Taking a little deeper dive into the food service category now. As you can see, prepared food represents over 60% of the total food service category for convenience stores. Prepared food and cold dispense drove that whole category. You can see up 10.6% and up 8.3%. The sour note, as I mentioned, there's a lot of highs and a lot of sour notes. The sour note in this chart really is that hot dispensed beverages. 75% of hot dispensed beverages in a convenience store is coffee. And that the fact that it's down 1.26% probably has to do with increased coffee competition from QSRs, McDonald's, McCafe, Starbucks, Tim Hortons, Dunkin' Donuts growing and cutting into that business. It's also, there's some economic reasons behind that. As Dean pointed out to me, when you have high unemployment and fewer people going to work, well, you got fewer people stopping at the convenience store on their way to work to buy their coffee in the morning. So it's understandable that it's down. There's also all that competition means there's price pressures, which brings the average sales down. But it's also a sore point. Convenience stores can't afford to lose the coffee customer in the morning because how many people just buy the coffee? Most people go in there and they buy a snack, they buy a donut, they buy a breakfast sandwich. So there's a lot of other ancillary sales tied in with that coffee purchase. So it's very important for convenience stores to win that hot dispensed beverage business.
On the prepared food analysis, Don and I were looking at where the growth is, and sandwiches is 7.2% with the highest average sales in the stores. Hot dogs, 10%, pizza, 14%, and it kind of goes down. And we were talking about what this meant to us. And sandwiches make sense because it's easily delivered. That's the one thing that most people don't have problems delivering. Hot dogs going up 10%. It surprised me because, you know, if every magazine you read says, how can we do hot dogs better? How can we get roller grill sales better? I think what's happened is that the people like the Sheetz and the Wawas have kind of separated doing better food service sales, and then the people kind of that realized, hey, we can't do what Sheetz and Wawa do. Let's do what we do better. They've kind of focused on roller grills and that sort of thing, but they're better merchandised, better taken care of. The places, I think, for the most part, we're starting to get away from the, hey, I don't want to eat a gas station mentality. I think we're starting to get our stores looking cleaner. So I think people are more apt to buy that sort of thing. I think pizza's coming back just because it's kind of come full circle in that, hey, this is something that we can deliver. I think, like I said before, I think everybody thought food service was a silver bullet, but what they didn't realize is that labor kills food service. You know, just because you can say, well, here's a piece of my career. We had 7 Winchell's grocery donut stores, and we thought, man, the margins are, 80%. Well, we didn't realize that bakers are $22 an hour, and we lost a bunch of money. So I think people are getting back to what they can deliver, and pizza is a low labor item that they can deliver. That's how I read this whole thing. And I think it's good because I think the two segments of the industry are starting to figure out what they do best, and that's good for the single store operators.
Right. I think we were talking this morning how, when you're trying to analyze food service, the industry is kind of like on a continuum from one end of the scale to another. And what you're seeing a lot is that the ones that are at the top end of the scale, well, they've moved on to other types of food product categories and food service and menu items. And then you have the others that have decided, well, we can't go that far, like you mentioned, Dean. And so we're going to focus on a roller grill. We're going to focus on something that's delivered by our wholesaler, as opposed to something that's fresh made at the store. So it's a whole broad spectrum of expertise in the food service business. Coming back to hot dispensed beverages, I get to talk about coffee again. You see, coffee was down. Cappuccino and specialty drinks was down even more. And again, if you come down to the economy again, where can you save a little bit of money? The cappuccino and the specialty drinks are probably one of those things that might be an indulgence that you could do away with. It's like an economic choice. The consumer is trying to save money. But as I mentioned earlier, this is extremely important for convenience stores to get back on track with the coffee and the hot dispensed beverage business. And as I mentioned, this chart shows the pie chart there. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, coffee represents 3/4 of that product category. So if you get coffee back on track, that'll make the whole category get back on track.
And cold dispensed beverages, once again, we had in carbonated fountain, we had almost 9% gain. Non-carbonated, almost 10% gain, and overall 8.3% gain. And this is huge news because this is at 63% margin. I mean, this is where the easy money is, and like Don said, we're starting to merchandise fountains, bringing in more flavors, bringing in more options, better cups. I just think the more time we can spend on this, marketing, bundling, this is the easy money, and it looks like we're actually starting to achieve results in that.
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking on that, we have a session tomorrow at this time here on how to do world-class food service with a panel of retailers, and Dean also joining us on that panel that's being moderated by our executive editor, Linda Lasanti. And in our series of how to do world-class food service, a lot of that is walking the operators through the steps to get to where you want to get. And after you get your good coffee program done, the next step usually is that fountain program. Get your fountain program to where you want before you start trying to get into competing with making made-to-order sandwiches in the store. One of the questions in this survey that we do for the industry report, which goes to convenience store operators across the country, is that we ask them to break out their food service sales by Daypart. Now, as you can see, lunch continues to be the largest share of dollars. 32% of their dollars go through the lunch hour, and breakfast is still a solid 24%. And then dinner is about 16%, is the third largest. What we're seeing among the operators that we talk to is a strategy that's unfolding. And the strategy appears to be defend breakfast and grow dinner. Dinner is the new frontier for a lot of operators, for a lot of convenience store operators. You look at, again, some of the advanced ones like Wawa. They're adding new items that are dinner-oriented to their menus. Some are even experimenting again with home meal replacement, like Nice and Easy in central New York State. So we're seeing that this strategy of having to defend breakfast, grow dinner as being the strategy of a lot of the more advanced food service operators in the convenience store business. At the same time, as this is going on, we're not in a closed world. We've got to recognize that the QSRs are not taking this lying down. They're coming into the business, and you can see a lot of their focus has been on the breakfast business, but also on a lot of those snack occasions. You look at morning snack, afternoon snack, evening snack. That's the focus of a lot of the attention of the QSRs going forward. So that's probably something convenience stores need to look out for in the coming year.
And one thing I can add to that from working with so many QSR people, they're, like Don said, they're attacking breakfast. Subway just has marginally had breakfast, but it's an attack. And they're all attacking breakfast, because we've always owned that segment. And part of their attack program is portability. I think that in the past, sometimes convenience store, food service, you get something and you're trying to go down the road and it falls in your lap. So they're trying to do that. And then in all the other snack segments, they're trying to do it, most of what they're doing so it'll fit in a cup holder. And so as you're kind of working on your items, you might think of that, because they want to make it easy to drive down the road and eat.
Great. Okay, so those are the highlights from our 2012 industry report. The full study will be in our June issue. So keep an eye out for that, because there'll be a lot more charts, a lot more data, and a lot of those categories, we break them down into even smaller subcategories to look at. But as I mentioned, convenience stores have to be pretty happy with the year they just had. But we wanted to not just look at last year. Like, what can we get some direction going into 2012 and how things are going? And particularly for this presentation, how are the efforts to increase food service being perceived by the consumer? So we decided to do a consumer survey. In January, at the end of January 2012, we did a survey to adults who said they shopped at a C-store in the past 30 days. So all these respondents were active convenience store shoppers, and we had over 1,000 responses to the survey. First question.
Frequency of C-store shopping. Almost every, this one kind of surprised me. In 2012, 9.2% frequent a convenience store versus 2011 or 7.9 in 2011. And Don brought up a point that I hadn't really thought of, is so many people are going to the station and filling their cars up halfway and then coming back, so their frequency's more. I know I do. And so in the old days, you'd fill you up, you get one stop. Now people probably come in and halfway fill it up. They feel like they have some disposable income, so they come in the store. And I would have never guessed that one in a million years. 2 or 3 times a week, it's kind of stayed flat. About once a week, pretty flat. 2 or 3 times a month, we've grown 2%. Once a month, we've grown kind of flat, I guess. And less than once a month, we've made improvements. So I would surprise me, those numbers. I wouldn't have guessed that in this economy, but the only thing I can think of is filling the gas half tank, and maybe convenience store people being much more aggressive and pulling people off the street.
Yeah, when I was at Speedway a couple weeks ago, I had an interview with the CEO, Tony Kenny. I actually mentioned this slide to him about how do you explain the visits, and he said that their numbers show that indeed they are getting more traffic at the stores. And his comment was, I'd like to say it's because we're doing some great promos and we're really on the cutting edge now with social media marketing and getting more people in the store. But he mentioned what you just mentioned. He said, I also think that people are coming for gas more often. They're not filling their tanks because of the high prices. And what he's also finding is that they are spending less inside the store. And that's, so again, when we start talking a little later about some of the things that keep convenience store operators up at night and that they worry about, you can see why high gas prices is a major issue for them. Another question we asked was we want to know, well, what was the reason for going to a convenience store? And no real surprises at the top. I mean, you would expect the majority to go for gasoline, to buy beverages and snacks. Those are the typical things you go to a convenience store for. What I did find somewhat surprising is that to buy prepared food was as far up as it was. It was above cigarettes, as a matter of fact, which I think, again, shows you the decline of cigarette smoking in the United States. So cigarette smoking now, not only was it only about 14% in January of 2012, but a year ago when we asked that question, the figure was almost 18%. Meanwhile, at the same time, to buy prepared food, the increase went from 17.5 to 20.2. So it would seem to me that convenience stores are, that consumers are recognizing convenience stores as a source for prepared meals and prepared food, which again is good news going into 2012 to maintain that momentum.
The top products in the past month that consumers bought in a convenience store is prepared fast food, 28.9%, versus we got some growth over 2011 by 3%. Hot dispensed beverage, 25, a couple percent there, and fountain and soda drinks, percent there. And I looked the same thing when I looked at this. If you look down two items, it's cigarettes at 16%. Now, when I was a long time ago into operations, it was always gasoline, cigarettes, and alcohol, always. And, it kind of shows the shift from how well we're doing in food service. And then when you look at that most of these items in this area are 40 to 60% gross margin percent versus cigarettes being 4 or 5. It's the whole industry's changed, and really from profitability standpoint, bad for the cigarettes that we used to make a lot of money on, but good in the survival sense that if we hadn't been in food service, survival might have been pretty tough with gasoline prices.
Since I've been on my coffee stick here to this morning, I'll mention again the nice uptick in hot dispensed beverages. Yeah. Hopefully that means that convenience stores are competing again and getting back into and doing a better job with the hot dispensed. All right, the next question we asked them was, how many times in the past month did you purchase prepared food at a convenience store? You can look at this in a couple of ways, this chart. Let's start with, I look at the 4 times level, because that would mean once a week. And if you look at once a week purchases were up. And that's a pretty regular shopper who's actually buying more often. But a lot of the other frequencies are down. And if you look at the mean number, it suggests that what we talked about earlier, that people are buying less often, even if they're going to the store more often, they're purchasing. This question was about purchasing. They're actually purchasing less often than they had been a year previously during January. The two surveys were both done at the end of January, so they're actually comparable in terms of a year apart.
How much did you spend in the month in the past on a prepared food items at a convenience store? The average is in 2011 is $21.38, and in 2020 it's almost $21. Now that surprised me because I would have thought it would significantly gone down with the economy the way it is. But I think that what's happening is the food service industry and convenience stores has kind of got away from discounting as bad as, you know, like in fast food and stuff. They're just cutting each other's throats continually, discounting, and their average tickets are going way down. So I think this is a really healthy number that we're able to maintain average transactions pretty well. And that tells me that we're focusing on quality and service rather than trying to keep up with McDonald's. And I've thought in fast food that discounting's just a kiss of death, because in my own instance of owning Subways and being a consultant for Subways, you know, $5 footlong was great, but once you're there, you can never get out, you know. And it's like the $9 pizza was the same thing. It's a great deal, but you can't ever get out. But the margins shrink like this. So I think this is really healthy for the convenience store industry that we're able to maintain that.
Right. And if those margins keep shrinking, and food costs keep going up too. So.
There's no room.
Okay, this question was a new question. We asked this for the first time in 2012. We asked, well, what else did you purchase at the C-store when you purchased food? And yes, I guess it's no real secret that when people buy food at a convenience store, they're buying drinks. So it's either bottled or canned soda or a fountain drink to go with it, a bottled water, or they're buying some kind of salty or sweet snack that goes with that. And I just think that speaks, though, to a competitive advantage of convenience stores in terms of bundling products together. You see a lot of convenience stores offering meal deals where it's a breakfast sandwich with coffee and an energy bar or something like that, all together in one deal for one price. And I think you're seeing a lot of innovative ways to build that average ticket up by bundling items together. And food service really lends itself, and prepared food items really lend themselves to bundling efforts. So it's a way of increasing the ticket and increasing sales without really discounting, like you mentioned. So I think that's been a real good strategy.
Overall, how satisfied are you with prepared food service and convenience store? Now, this is the most shocking number to me of all day. Is 20 years ago when I very first started, if you asked the same question, it might have been, hey, 20% of us are satisfied, and it would have never been, the word very would have been in there. But when you look at, between very and extremely is 68%, that's mind-boggling when you think about it, of how far in 20 years we've come to where we are now. And I think it's, people have learned how to present food service. I think one of the big things is people's spent time and focus on their facilities to make it look like, you'd want to go in there and eat food service rather than going to get your oil changed. And it was just remarkable to me, and it says a lot for the retailers. And, you even see it in the, they talk about 60% of the retailers being single store owners. I even see it a lot in those owners, because they now understand that we have to attract food service customers, and we compete with McDonald's. We don't compete with Chevron down the street. And that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only caveat I might say to that is that the question is, how satisfied were you with your last food service purchase? So these are people who did purchase food service, not people who didn't purchase food service. So we really don't know what they think of convenience store food service, but it's probably not as satisfied as these people are. So just something to keep in track of when you're doing this type of research. But it's still, as Gene said, it's an enormous improvement in the perception out there that consumers have of convenience stores food. This is another interesting chart, and the way they answered this question I thought was interesting. It was, which of the following attributes are most important to you when purchasing prepared food at a convenience store? Number one was price value, and it was up over the previous year, and that would be expected in a difficult economy, that price value would be high. What might be less expected, though, was that food quality and taste, you might think that those would have been trade-offs that consumers would be willing to accept to get a better value and go to a convenience store, but apparently not. People have high expectations for food service at convenience stores. Food quality increased as an important attribute, and so did taste. At the same time, convenience was down, and man, I mean, it's a convenience store, and convenience was down. That's kind of head scratching in some ways, but in another way, it's saying that consumers will look around. They'll drive around. They'll go to where they can either get the best value or the best quality products. So just because you have a store on the corner doesn't mean you're going to get the business when it comes to consumers purchasing prepared food from you. That doesn't apply to all convenience store categories, because if it was gasoline, for example, the only thing that would make people turn into your store instead of someone else's would be a lower price, because price is so important when it comes to selling fuel. But for prepared food, this is very, very interesting findings.
The one thing I noticed on that slide too is if you look down, customer service is like third from the bottom. And I've always thought that customer service is something that anybody can give. It doesn't cost you anything, and you just wonder what the numbers would be like. I mean, I was surprised that they didn't have more of a value on that. So that makes me believe they're not really offering, they don't have very high expectations of service when they come in. And the other thing, I guess, as an operator, they don't really put a lot of, they have sanitation as like the sixth one, but food safety and sanitation should be your first priority, because it should never even be on this thing as their concern. I don't think when you go in McDonald's you really think about food safety, because you just assume they're doing it. Whereas in a convenience store, I know a lot of people that never go in there and eat because they think they're going to die. I mean, no, there's no other way to say it, but.
Well, that goes again to this group of convenience stores that probably still dependent on cigarettes and fuel. We really don't know what kind of perception they are generating for their competitors in convenience. So if you go to one of these stores, if you're a competitor and you want to launch a food service program, well, you've got to not only overcome what consumers think of your store that sells fuel, also selling food. You got to think about what they have already learned from shopping and buying food at your competitor's store.
If you haven't purchased prepared food at a convenience store, where are you most likely to have purchased it? This is not a big surprise. 60%. If you made another choice, you go to McDonald's, and that was up 3% over last year. Prepared food takeout from a supermarket, down from last year. Casual dining, Don and I just decided to disregard this because neither one of us could figure out why this was in there. Only thing I could figure out is now casual dining is offering 4 entrees for $10 or something. That's about the only reason why I could think they would drive there. I would have a prepared or eaten at home, and that kind of surprised me a little bit in this economy that almost somewhat went in half. So, you look at it, and, overall it's still the McDonald's of the world that we're competing against. And, coffee in the morning with McDonald's and all the Subways of the world and everybody attacking breakfast, I think that's our biggest problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the prepared and eating food at home is a generational thing also that's going on. Despite all the Food Network and foodies out there that think they're going to buy all those products and bring them home and create these dream meals, I think that's a minority in terms of the actual number of people that are doing that. If you look at even the Latino population, we have a magazine that covers Hispanic retailing, and we've looked at generational changes in the Latino shopper, which is a growing part of the population, and the fastest growing segment, of course, of the Latino population are Latinos born in the U.S. It's not first generation, they're not immigrants, and these Latina moms are cooking and shopping much more the traditional American Anglo way than they are their previous generations would. So I think convenience wins out almost every day when it comes to food. So I think that's probably part of the reason why that's there. Yeah. Good point. I didn't hear that. The number of restaurants that are offering curbside to go could also be part of the reason for the fleeing from the casual dining segment there. Okay. Okay, we're going to wrap up and finalize with a few slides that talk about, what are the biggest concerns for convenience store retailers? Because we talked a lot about, what they're doing to drive food service sales, but all's not sunshine and flowers in this food service business. One of the big concerns that food service operators in the convenience field tell us is about food costs, rising food costs. When you're in a economy like it is now, and with competitive pressures, everybody wants a piece of that convenience customer. Rising expenses is always going to kill you. So food costs is really a big concern. Rising gas prices and the overall economic uncertainty in the economy is also a major issue, and we'll show a few slides that illustrate why that is so. Competition from outside the market. It's not just QSRs, but if you talk to a lot of convenience store retailers, they'll tell you the drugstores that worry them more than anybody else. Walgreens and CVS selling cigarettes, selling grab-and-go sandwiches, selling hot coffee, selling beer. Drugstores, dollar stores are considered major competitors. And then just again, the overall challenge they have for competing with QSRs, when QSRs get so much of their business through drive-thrus, and convenience stores really have never been able to really crack that in a major way. But Dean will talk about that a little later. And then increasing food service selection and sourcing. For a lot of retailers, they just don't know how far do you go with your menu? How many more menu items do you need? How do you source this? Traditional convenience store distributors have been behind the curve in a lot of cases in terms of providing the food, the prepared food opportunities for convenience stores. So we're seeing a big learning curve here. Convenience stores really turning to their suppliers and wholesalers for help in this area. So if you're a supplier or a wholesaler in the audience, they're going to listen to you if you come up with solutions and ideas for menus and sourcing product. And then finally, addressing healthy eating trends. We all know that there's a lot of publicity about obesity in America and how moms want to provide healthier food for their families. Well, again, it goes back to that gas station concept. How successful can you be at convincing mom that this is a safe and healthy place to buy food? So, oops, I went too far. Earlier this year, we had a food service roundtable. We gathered 12 retail operators that are food service directors at convenience store chains, from Wawa to Circle K to all the major players, and we asked them what really concerns you. And as I mentioned earlier, food inflation, it was the #1 item that they all said was what worried them. Food price inflation. So that's a big issue with them. And then during the summit, which we held at Tyson Foods headquarters in Springdale, Arkansas. The message there from one of the major suppliers of protein to both supermarkets and food service was, don't expect a lot of easing of pressure on prices. Supply is still lagging, and prices will remain high or go higher on most protein products, which again puts more pressure on operators both in the supermarkets and food service and at convenience stores.
According to USDA Department of Energy information, the U.S. administration for 2012, the average retail price of gasoline is going to be $3.73. Well, I live in Seattle and it's $4.14. So We all know that's not going to be true. I have a friend who's legislator for the state of Alaska, and he's also on the National Energy and Gas Commission. And he thinks that with all the political unrest in the Middle East, that's not going to go away. He thinks the thing in Iran, this Strait of Hormuz is, somebody holding a pistol to your head, that we're probably looking at $5 a gallon gasoline pretty much as a steady for the future. Well, if that's the case, then I think we need to sort of come up with a business plan of how we're going to deal with that. Maybe getting gas, filling up twice a week isn't a bad thing if we can count on it and market it that way. I also think that I saw that the ex-president of General Motors was on there, and he says that by 2025, they plan on having 50% of the cars out on the road as being hybrids. Well, that's not good for our industry. And so I think there's some realities in this that we just have to face and figure out how we're going to merchandise it. And I don't like sounding like the Grim Reaper on this, but I also don't think that it's unrealistic to think that $5 a gallon's not here to stay. And I just think we need to figure out how we're going, what our strategic plan is. And even like right now, I'm consulting with a client that's thinking about buying 23 subways. And I try to go through worst case scenario with everybody and say, okay, now build your marketing plan here. Worst case scenario, we know that there's a possibility of flour being up 20% in 5 years. May not happen, may not. Worst case scenario, if fuel goes up, to these prices, they're going to be adding $5 to delivery of every charge we get. Figure all that in. Labor, we know what's going to go up. And then make the assumption of where this price ceiling is. And, in food service sometimes, the only reason why I kind of bring this in, because we're talking about food service, is I think when you're doing projects of like, hey, should I go into this? Or should I do this food service segment? I always try to be like absolute worst case scenario thinker, because then if anything better than that happens, you look like a hero. But if you're sitting there hoping gas prices going down, or hoping food service prices are going down, or hoping labor's going down, it's just not going to happen. And so I guess, I know that sounds like the Grim Reaper, and maybe that wasn't where I was supposed to go with this, but since we are talking food service, I think that we really need to be careful about how we approach future projects.
And, just to look at the average national price of fuel, this is the percent change of fuel from the previous month, and it looks like someone's having a cardiac arrest. Actually, the fuel and cigarette retailers, if you haven't got the message yet that this is not the way to go, I don't think you'll ever get the message at this point. But they're the ones that are in trouble. They're the ones that have to kind of develop the rudimentary food service business, and while the others have to take theirs to another level.
Consumer Sentiment Index. I went to business school, and when I first looked at this one, I said, Don, I don't know what this is, but he had to help me out. Lower consumer confidence and loss of disposable income is basically is what's happening here. Like we were talking, people that have jobs are scared to death of losing them. Working in Seattle, I have friends that have lost their job at Microsoft, and 10 years ago that was unthinkable. Because Microsoft, it just wasn't even possible as a thought process. So, that's one thing. And then consumer confidence. And whenever you've got like this thing, even if you've got a job and you're afraid you're going to lose your job at Microsoft, your disposable income is going to go down. Gasoline, like I was saying, if my son makes, I don't know what number we were using, $1,000 a month, and he spent $100 a month in gasoline, then he had to spend $200 a month in gasoline. That's $100 less a month than he can spend on candy in the convenience stores. There's really no other way to look at it. And so I think that, once again, that's what's going on, and it's probably not going to change.
Yeah, I mean, the gray bars on that chart represent periods of recession in the United States. So you can see, you know, we're about where it was during the 2008 recession back there. So consumers aren't feeling really good. It's an election year. I don't think that's going to have much of an impact over their sentiment, because there's going to be a lot of spin from both sides of the aisle in terms of how the economy's doing. The latest job reports came out. You can anticipate. One side said, "Oh, it's a great, it's an improvement." The other side said, "Well, yeah, the number went down, but fewer people are working," which, you know, so you know, it's not good, as Dean mentioned, and so. That affects a lot of your investment initiatives for the coming year, obviously. The other thing that concerns convenience store retailers is the amount of money they spend in credit card transaction fees. Oil companies aren't the only people getting rich off of rising motor fuel prices, and the banks are banking out like bandits at this. As the price of gasoline goes up, how do you pay for gas? You stick your credit card into the dispenser in most cases, and the retailer at some point might be making less money than the bank is making on that transaction. This chart comes from the National Association of Convenience Stores. It shows that credit card fees, that combines credit and debit together, grew from $3.2 billion in 2003 to $11.1 billion in this just completed year, and that's $4 billion more than the entire pre-tax profits of the convenience store industry last year. So it's a huge issue. You may have read a lot about last year about debit card reform. Congress passed a law giving the Federal Reserve authority to regulate fees that the banks charge on debit card transactions. And NACS reports that in the last 2 months of 2011, they estimate that the industry saved about $90 million in transaction fees. Yeah, still hit 11.1 billion. So, you know, that's good news, but it's certainly not good enough. And we all know that's only covered a small portion of these transaction fees. The reform that was passed had no effect on credit card transaction fees. It was just the debit card piece of it. And now you're seeing a lot of the banks trying to get people to use credit cards more than debit cards because they're making more money on the credit cards than the debit cards. So, you know, just in the last year, they went up 19.8% per store in transaction fees. So that continues to be an issue that worries convenience stores going forward.
What impact, if negative impact, have the following food service options had on your food service sales over the past 2 years? The other is 64% is just other convenience stores. So if you're X, your convenience store Y cut into you that much. QSR cut into you 50%, which surprised me. I thought it'd be a little higher. And grocery store prepared foods 49%, and drug stores and others 48%. And I just kind of read that as we're getting cannibalized in a way, in sort of a way, so we're competing against each other, which I think is a good thing because all of our food services are developing to the level that people want to come and eat at our convenience stores. Before, I would say 15 years ago, McDonald's would have had to have been way higher because there was no competition between ourselves. So I think that speaks to the quality of food service now in our C stores. I don't know how you read it. But.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and it's also, I mean, you know, a decade ago, Nielsen was talking about the blurring of retailing and talking about that as a trend. Well, that's not a trend. That's here now. So, you know, as we're talking about what convenience stores are doing to grow their food service business and take sales away from restaurant operators, well, they got to watch their flanks. You got dollar stores now that are selling cigarettes and cold drinks and a lot of the same product categories that convenience stores sell. As I mentioned earlier, the drug stores. Walgreens never sold cigarettes before. Now they're selling cigarettes. They're selling packaged sandwiches to go. So retail is retail. Everybody's selling the same thing. Everybody's stepping on each other's toes. So you have to have a broad perspective on who your competition is. I remember when I was in the home improvement industry and covering the big box home improvement retailers. And I had an interview with Bernie Marcus of Home Depot, and I said, "Well, who do you watch for competition? I guess Lowe's is your guy that you really worry about because they're coming on strong. They're growing at a faster rate than you are right now." And he goes, "Nah, anybody who sells a hammer is my competition." And I think convenience stores have to say, anybody that sells what we sell is a competition, and you see the competition from all sides.
Drive-throughs are a big thing that restaurants are pushing for, really the number one thing. And I originally wasn't going to take this slide, but Don said, Subway, they're like obsessed with getting drive-throughs. And what they're doing is they're building drive-throughs in California that the ramps are like up here. You drive your car up on a ramp so you can look down at what you're doing, because that's always been one of the things with Subway drive-throughs is, give me this, this, and this, and then you're up against what Taco Bell is, where maybe 50% of the time you get what you ask for. And Papa John's or Papa Murphy's and a lot of those people that are taking bake places are trying to figure out how to do drive-through because it's faster. And out in Seattle where we're at, it's, when it rains, our sales will be down 20-30% because nobody wants to get out of the car with 5 kids, haul them into the store as opposed to drive through McDonald's. And the reason why I asked Don to take this slide is when I was director of operations, we built 2 convenience stores with drive-throughs, and it's huge success. But what we did is we limited to 5 items. We took our 5, and I know that some convenience stores have had success with somebody coming in with a list and it's got milk and cat food and all this stuff. We just said, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to do our 5 best items. Then it was cigarettes, coffee, I think it was donuts. I don't remember the other 2. And extremely successful because we kind of trained our customers to expect what came through, and they could go through there on the way to work quick, didn't have to get out of their car. The other advantage is both of these stores, the main reason why we did it is we didn't have a lot of parking. And it's the one thing that can solve big-time parking problems. And I think we had like a 40% lift in each one of those stores because of the drive-thrus. And I think it was primarily stopping to get parking. So I think that's maybe something what people want to look at for convenience stores in the future.
Yeah, Dean, I think we're going to see a lot. Well, we're going to be doing a lot of stories in the coming year or more on tests and experiments with drive-through in the convenience store industry. Sheetz and a couple of other companies are testing them, and we'll see how it goes. In some cases, competitively, you have to do them. I mean, if you're in Canada, for example, you compete with Tim Hortons. Well, the culture there, the consumer is expecting a drive-through. So if you're in that business, you're going to sell coffee, you almost have to have a drive-through. So it is a challenge. It's something that I would say currently is a competitive disadvantage to convenience stores versus the QSR. But it's something that they'll probably continue to drill into and try to improve at. Okay. Well, I told you we'll give some predictions and some concluding remarks, and then if we have time, I think we'll take some questions from the audience. If we look at what's next for the convenience store industry, I think the message, because of the economy and for a number of other reasons, the competition, convenience stores can't be the place to go for consumers to spend more for something because they can't get it somewhere else. Convenience stores have to promote value. They have to be value-oriented. Many convenience stores now look at the grocery store pricing and price against the grocery store in their market as opposed to other convenience stores. I think we're going to see more private label at convenience stores. So currently, convenience stores are underdeveloped in private label versus other channels of retailing like grocery and drugstores. But I think you're going to see a major effort. And it's not going to be just the big guys like 7-Eleven with 7 Select brand. You're going to see companies like I was traveling and visited the MapGo Mega convenience store in Central Arkansas recently, and we saw the new additions of 220 new private label SKUs that they introduced into their store, and these ran across the board. This was spring and purified waters, soft drinks, snacks, cold grab-and-go items, candy, cigarettes, dry grocery goods, children's drinks, teas, energy shots. The list goes on. All the different private label items that they added to their mix. And we're going to see more retailers, convenience store retailers, doing that. Retailers are going to sell more fresh food. Some of them are going to have to, in order to do that, are going to have to invest in commissary deliveries and warehouse in their own warehouse distribution in order to keep inventory down and keep the product fresher. As I mentioned about convenience store wholesalers earlier, they're going to get better also at providing food service, because a lot of the convenience stores are not going to be able to invest in those things, and they're going to need help from their wholesalers to provide that type of fresh food that their customers are looking for. And then finally, on the technology front, I think the big chains are going to drive a lot of technology innovation in the convenience store industry. For example, in marketing, you're going to see more use of social media, text messaging programs, and loyalty programs are going to be very, very big going forward. Particularly loyalty programs where you can offer discounts on fuel purchases. There's one company called Parker's in Savannah, Georgia, which introduced a new loyalty card where when you stick the card into the dispenser, you actually can see the price go down on the dispenser, and that's just a great thing because everybody knows the price of fuel, and everybody wants a discount on fuel because it's so high. And then also on the supply chain, convenience stores are one of the most difficult most costly supply chain channels out there because there's 148,000 different locations. But you're going to see more technology in this area, particularly in the area of automatic replenishment, so that the supplier, the wholesaler, will deliver the right amount of product to a store, and the store won't just get whatever's remaining on the truck when it comes in. They'll actually get what they ordered when they need it. It'll be done automatically. And then, Dean, you have some thoughts on it?
Well, the last thought I had is I don't know how many people out here are already in food service and convenience stores. Maybe some thinking about it. And if you're thinking about it, I would just take all the factors in. Get somebody to look at your numbers before you just jump out there and do it. And I think maybe 10 or 15 years, we had a lot of people just jump out there and do it because they heard food service was a way to make money. I'm consulting for a guy that wants to buy 23 Subways, and he merely took the sales, took rent, and took the interest rates, and come up with his number of how much money he was going to make. And I said to him, well, did you look at this line item by line item of what could happen? And he goes, no, I just know that the Subway food costs are 30% now. So like Don was saying, we have to assume with India and China's growing economy, we have to assume maybe wheat is never going to be what it was 5 years ago. We have to assume flour is going to be higher. All of these things that have to be considered. Labor's going to grow. All of these things, and all I can say is if you're thinking about going in, spend the time and doing an in-depth analysis, worst case scenario, so you can be successful, rather than just shoot from the hip. It's a disaster, and then some poor guy in operations, which I know you are, has to try to bail it out. And I've been in that situation.
Thanks, Dean. So that concludes our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I know there's a lot of data there, but as was mentioned, the charts and the presentation will be available at the NRA website for download, so you could take the graphs and do with them as you please. We have a few minutes for questions. If we got one from over there. Yeah, actually, we don't have that here, but the survey we did does have age demographics tied to it that we could break that out. Want to give me your card later? I could help you find that out. Yeah, I have to dig into the research. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take this one. But we're seeing a move to definitely upgrade the stores. We were talking about the MAPCO store that we visited in Central Arkansas. It did have an in-store dining area for consumers. The thing with the amount of investment being spent on upgrading the indoor facilities to meet consumer expectations, a lot of it's been the economy. We do a annual store design contest, for example, and when we launched it 3 years ago, we had so many entries because everybody was upgrading and opening new prototypes and stuff. We've seen a market, and talking to the store designers themselves, we've seen a market decline in that when the recession hit. Now it's starting to come back. We're hearing it's coming back. So I think in the coming year, like this MAPCO mega store that we just saw, and then Come and Go, another retail that's opened some real bright new convenience stores. I think you're going to see more of it coming. But a lot of that tends to ebb and flow with the economy in terms of whether they can spend the money, because it's a lot of stores to redo. You know, so but you're going to see more of it, definitely. Oh yeah, from what we hear, that the consumers are responding to it by buying more and then accepting it as food service. Yeah, and we've had instances like that in the convenience store industry. Yeah, Sheets with their lettuce and tomato scare. If you look at some of the more advanced ones, but they all have now hiring experts in quality control. Quick Trip in Wisconsin has a whole lab for testing products and training their employees and how they handle. Okay, we got 2 more questions, and then I think we got to get out of the room for the next speaker. So, either one of you. I'm not sure, but if you leave me your card, I'll see if we have it in our research and the actual numbers of items that on average, you're talking about. It's not for a particular company. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you give me a call, I'll see if we can find that. I think there's a difference there. When I said so, the growth of private label cuts across all product categories. I mean, that's going across all categories, and in most cases, that's a value play. That's providing a higher margin on the water bottled water you're selling. In food service, it's really, do you have the brand to support that? Do people trust your brand? Now, if you don't, if you're one of those retailers that are making sticking your toes into food service, that's the way to go, is with a branded partner, because that gives you the credibility you need to get into the business. But if you already have that credibility, if you're a company like a Sheets, you just put Sheets on everything, and people already accept that. So I think that's the Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank Dean for helping out on the presentation. Really appreciate it. And we'll be around here, and just drop a business card or something with me, and I'll get back to you.